thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. It's been several years since we've seen each other last, so I really appreciate you coming in for this. I think that the thing that I want to start with is, as we're right now in the middle of, shall we call it a crisis of some sort. I think it's fair to say a lot of people are going, what's going to be coming up ahead? Lots of people are trying to second guess the future. And while we certainly can't predict that particular company or anything like that is going to fare better or worse than something else, I'd be curious to hear if you've seen some themes or some sectors or some trends that are emerging where you're going, okay, this is where we really see the future lies over the next 5 or maybe even longer, even further out in the future.
It is a very almost awkward time to do a lot of forecast about the future.
Yes.
But in many ways, it is also it feels like something that will happen and pass. It's not something that COVID isn't going to stay with us forever.
No.
And so when this does pass, I think you have to go back to the fundamentals and what are the key sort of macro trends that we were dealing to before COVID happened that will persist post-COVID. And in my mind, the most obvious one is climate change. I mean, this is a country that started its new decade with most of the a large portion of the country burning. One of the strongest, one of the most intense fire seasons we've seen. So climate change is going to remain fore and center, I believe, for the next decade. We will not only start seeing the impacts happen, but we will start seeing the need for more and more action. Again, what COVID has shown that, sometimes it takes a crisis for people to act. And I think we'll start reaching that crisis point with climate change over the next decade. And so the investment theme that will dominate, and there's almost 2 sub-themes, is investing to make existing industries, economies, businesses more resilient to climate change. And the second thing will be transitioning towards a low carbon economy, which was sort of a key plank of the work that I drove over the last 3 years. And again, it was slow on the uptake, but what we saw from the companies that had started in that space, that were building solutions for a low carbon future, they were amongst the best performing companies in our portfolio from a revenue growth perspective, from a profitability perspective. So I think the whole technologies and businesses and services that help the economy transition to a low carbon economy will be a very dominant theme and a very profitable theme as well into the next decade.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things that the way we look at it is that, companies that go into, shall we call it, bettering the environment in one way or another, they have to do better than everybody else because they're actually held up against 2 standards, not just one.
Absolutely.
A lot of other companies, there's an economic standard, okay, you're making money, what's the profitability, These are held up by that, as well as, well, how much you're doing better, how much you're doing good, and what's going to be the long-term impact with the work that you do. And in my observation, it makes them work even harder, and it sounds like that's getting reflected in the figures that you've been seeing.
It's interesting. Climate change is one of those themes that impacts every facet of the economy. If you summarize it down, it comes back to the fundamentals of energy, where we source, how we generate and how we store and how we use energy. That's a whole big kind of picture. And as that shifts towards renewable, cleaner sources, it sort of cleans up the industry along the way. But then you have to have very concerted focus on sort of the other big sectors, and that's construction and property. That's a huge part of the Australian economy. And there will be, and again, the institutional property market shifted over the last decade to a clean future, but the commercial and residential sector hasn't. And there's a whole set of investment that needs to do to transition these residential and commercial buildings into being greener and smarter buildings. So it's the interplay of clean energy and also, digital technologies, which will be very interesting. And then you have to look at the food production sector. And recently everybody would have heard of all these plant-based alternatives and the growing interest, investment into these areas. So where we source our food from, how we produce our food, the carbon footprint of the food we consume becomes front and center of the conversation. So that's another theme. So what we eat, and then transportation. So where we live, what we eat, and how we move around, these are fundamentals to our lives, and these are core industries, and all of them need to shift one way or another. So again, technology and businesses leveraging this technology to provide, alternative or services that have a lower footprint will do well.